I'm going to I'm going to tee things up. Just do a little intro here to our virtual audience, and then I'll just start asking you the questions, and we can go from there. You good?
I'm good. Let's
Great.
go.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited. We have a special guest, Tony Costantino, and Tony was a CEO of a medical laboratory who sold his business. He did an unbelievable job of growing the business, selling the business. I don't want to give too much of the plot away. I'm going to get Tony to tell us all about his story, but it is a wonderful success story, and there are just so many great lessons learned for everyone here. I really want you to take it in and to learn from this, and hopefully, you can replicate Tony's success, which was truly phenomenal. So I'll just start here, Tony. Maybe just start by introducing yourself. Give us a brief overview of your career leading up to your role as CEO. Just for our audience.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Dario. So the medical laboratory business. So I spent majority of my 30 plus career managing operations in commercial medical laboratories. I have a doctorate in forensic toxicology, so the drug testing world of various types is my expertise. And the laboratories that I worked in offered different types of drug testing services to customers focused, at least in part, in either forensic or clinical medicine. My first position out of graduate school was actually a 90-day temporary employee with American Medical Laboratories, known as AML, in Fairfax, Virginia. That turned into a 12-year temporary job.
Wow.
Yeah, that laboratory was privately owned by a group of pathologists and was acquired by private equity-backed venture 7 years later. So that was a good exposure for me. I was able to work well with the new executive leadership team and was fortunate to be part of their process, which grew the company from about $40 million in revenue to $300 million. And that growth occurred both organically and with a major acquisition. Then that laboratory was acquired by Quest Diagnostics 5 years later. And that's actually Quest Diagnostics in Chantilly, Virginia now.
Gotcha. Interesting. So it went from founder owned to private equity owned to strategic buyer.
Correct.
Great story. Great story. So tell us. Oh, sorry, Tony.
No, I was going to say, so that was all good exposure for me, and I learned a lot through those different processes. It was actually became like 3 different companies along the way.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your CEO role, then the one that you eventually transitioned into, and how that came about, and maybe why you saw that as an attractive career path for you.
Yeah. So given all that I've learned and the successes that I had, and frankly, making a lot of money for a lot of other people, I wanted to take these experiences from working under these great visionaries who provided great examples, and I wanted to do something on my own. I wanted to actually start a lab from scratch, but no one wanted to back that idea. So I partnered with one of the principals of AML that actually was involved in selling the company to Quest, and a former coworker who had a business development background. And together with some private equity backing, we bought a small toxicology laboratory here in Pennsylvania.
Gotcha. So that's again another interesting lesson learned is building your network, right, and finding people who you like, especially with people with some money that know a business and that maybe they don't want to be the day-to-day operator, right, but they still want to maybe see an opportunity and invest in it and be a part of the upside.
Exactly. And I remember when I was asked if I wanted to do this, I said, well, can I run it as the CEO? And he said, of course you can run it as the CEO, because that's a younger man's game.
Hey, Tony, just a little bit off the cuff here, but tell us about just the transition from being like, a scientist to a CEO. Did you do an MBA? Was it the School of Hard Knocks? Tell us a little bit about how you developed the skill set to really run a company.
Yeah, so that's a question I get often. I've always been attracted to how businesses are run. I do not have an MBA or any formal training. I'll go back. I was raised. My father was a partner in a company that designed hospital and built hospital furniture, doctor's office furniture, and I worked in that factory in high school and some in college. Then I started out as a pharmacist and worked for independent pharmacies, thinking that I wanted to have my own pharmacy someday. And I paid attention to kind of all those critical operating characteristics of making the business run beyond just servicing servicing the customers. And when I had these experiences out of graduate school at American Medical Laboratory and the company that I was with subsequently here in Pennsylvania before buying DRUGSCAN, I would say it was something I always wanted to do, so I just paid attention. And I think that's the best answer that I can give. That experience with the private equity backed management team at American Medical Laboratory was an MBA in and of itself.
For sure. The level of discipline and rigor that they expect, right?
Right. And the strategy.
Yeah.
The strategy to grow the company. And I also appreciated their transparency. They knew they had smart people working for them. The more awareness they created about what were their goals, the better participation they got from their employee resources.
Yep. So what was the name of the company that you and your colleague founded?
So it was actually an established company. There was actually two companies. We go under the name DRUGSCAN. That's the laboratory part of the business, but they also had a company called DSI Medical, which was a third-party administrator of drug testing services. So DRUGSCAN was the drug testing laboratory, and DSI Medical Services had the customers. They would schedule the collections and the reporting and the administrative details for the customers, and they actually contracted with DRUGSCAN as the laboratory. And this was all under the same ownership.
Gotcha.
So I thought it was a brilliant model developed by the founder of that company. Gotcha. So yeah, the company, when we looked at the company was in great shape financially, but had very little reinvestment over the years. And we had funding to get it to the next level. So I was just chopping at the bit, seeing a diamond in the rough.
So tell us about how you grew that business. Where did it start? Where did it end? And what were the things that you did to get it to where?
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you the story. So as I mentioned, DRUGSCAN's predominant business at the time we acquired them was workplace drug testing for the customers of DSI Medical. Both we actually called that company officially Toxicology Holdings. So we bought the companies in November of 2008, when the near-term future of pre-employment drug testing was bleak. With that said, we were able to hold our own that first year and finished flat in revenue year over year, while most of the industry declined by more than 20%. The reason for that was DRUGSCAN had a relatively large percentage of government-regulated customers, which had a built-in mandatory random testing rate, and that stabilized the testing volume for DRUGSCAN. But because of the decrease in pre-employment testing nationally at that time, some segments were down 50%. There were market pressures by our largest competitors, and keep in mind in all of this, we were a small competitor. But the large competitors like the Quests and the LabCorps were converting customers with lower pricing in order to gain market share, but we couldn't compete against that pricing. So my solution was to have DSI Medical switch all of its drug testing customers from DRUGSCAN to one of the large competitors.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So the pricing we received, we negotiated, was 20% less than our cost basis to perform that testing.
So you actually outsourced the drug testing to a national laboratory?
We did. That was the workplace drug testing.
Wow.
Exactly. Exactly. So immediately that improved the bottom line. But there were other areas of toxicology into which I wanted to grow. So that allowed us to grow. Allowed us to grow that drug testing business with a more competitive pricing structure, and in turn gave us the bandwidth internally to convert the testing laboratory from a workplace drug testing lab to a clinical toxicology laboratory, where we were offering drug testing services to physicians' offices for their patients, to addiction treatment centers for their patients, to hospital laboratories who were outsourcing this type of work, and to other clinical laboratories that ultimately did not have as expansive a menu as we did.
Huh.
So in order to do all that, we had to change our testing platforms, which means buying new equipment and redesign the entire laboratory space. So not having that workplace drug testing, like I said, gave us the opportunity, the bandwidth to accomplish all of that.
Interesting. So that obviously took a little bit of courage, right, to offload and then to pivot, but nevertheless you did it, and it turned out to be a good decision.
Yeah, yes, it did. I remember going to a board meeting and talking about this idea, what I wanted to do, and kind of had all the pricing negotiated. And I remember the board members looking at each other and one of them said, "So let me get this straight. We bought a drug testing laboratory 6 months ago, and now we're not going to do drug testing." I said, "Exactly."
Right.
I said, "Okay." So they had confidence in the plan.
Great. So you took that business from 6 million to 35 million over 9 years. I think you told me that. So tell us a little bit about the strategies and tactics that really drove the growth.
Yeah, I love that question. So let me give a little background. So starting with, the laboratory business is a government regulated service business. And any successful service business, of course, needs to understand the customers and the customers' problems for which the service or the company or the service is designed to address and solve in a timely manner. So the understanding of the customer came from years of experience servicing this customer base, and also making good hires of individuals who also understood that type of customer. And of course, all of that was incorporated into our mission, because that sensitivity around quality, compliance, and the customer, needed to be pervasive throughout the company. And I think a mission statement is a good place to start, because in a rapidly growing, almost startup kind of company, you not only need to establish culture, but you need to nurture and grow the culture. And sometimes that can be difficult when you're facing rapid growth. So I think the mission statement is a good start to make sure that develops and remains intact. So the mission, I think, should become the mantra and top of mind for all employees. That's the goal. So I think the success here boils down to the culture, which of course stemmed from the leadership. Now, tactically, we serve the customers by building robust, reliable platforms, scalable platforms, and that met the needs of all internal and external customers. If we're working hard, if it's difficult to create our service, it's difficult to use our service, and we needed to be dependable on a consistent basis for the employees and for the customers.
Yeah.
So how the customer works with the company, like I said, I keep using the word easy. Customers in healthcare are very busy, and they need laboratory services. and they don't have laboratory in-house usually. So we needed to make it easy for them to get what they need. So in that light, it was very important that we listen to the voice of the customer and strive to incorporate what we could to continuously improve the process and the experience for the customer. So I actually held a daily voice of the customer meeting, which is just something I learned from the private equity backed group at American Medical Lab. Voice of the customer meeting was daily, included all leadership and key employees. And in that meeting, we discussed company and customer issues and the resolutions in as close to real time as possible. And I think in any service business, there should be that type of get together on a daily basis.
Yeah. Hey, Tony, so were you taking business away from other labs then at that time?
Not yet. I mean, we had some, I'd say, friends of the family that wanted to do business with us.
Yep.
And actually, that was one of the greatest challenges of growing the business. It became very competitive. There's a lot of money to be made in clinical drug testing, and like I said, it became very competitive. So the way we addressed that was we would hire sales reps who had some familiarity with the type of customer that we want, type of customer that would be a good fit for our company. And those customers had to be located in geographies where we had good market access through managed care payer contracts.
Sure.
So, and even then, as I said, people in the healthcare are busy. If they have a service vendor that's working well for them, they have very little incentive to change, because the payment to the laboratory is through healthcare reimbursement. There's no, pricing competition, and because of the regulatory environment, there really aren't any incentives
Gotcha.
that you can offer. So sometimes we just had to be, and in order to convert a customer, we just wanted a chance. Sometimes we would get a trial, but often we just needed to be known kind of as next man up when the current vendor dropped the ball on a key service level.
Gotcha. So in that industry, then the service was really the differentiator.
Right, service, which includes quality and compliance.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And delivery of the correct results in a timely fashion.
Gotcha.
It's got to be easy for the customer. So they don't want to have to dig through a pile of papers to find their report. They don't want to have a cumbersome requisition to complete. Needs to be easy, and of course that involves good training of the customer too, which can only happen if you have a good relationship.
Yeah. So did you do, I know you mentioned you did the voice of the customer internal meetings. Did you do any other type of, again, customer research? Did you do like Net Promoter Score, or is there any other kind of sort of formal program where you were, kind of getting insight back from the customer?
Yeah, we belong to several industry groups, but I would say most of our market intelligence was by visiting prospects, listening to our current customer, which, as you said, was the voice of the customer, but it was mostly feet on the street and being on the telephone, asking them what they need and learning about their pay points, and also keeping our ear to the ground and having relationships with the competition. In my role, I had good relationships with many of the other CEOs of the competitor laboratories, and we even had an industry trade group where we would share information toward our common goal. So it's all types of input, but I'd say paying attention to the competition is the broad stroke I would put above that. Brainstorming with industry partners and keeping good internal metrics as well.
Yeah, yeah. So just in terms of scaling the business, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so in growing the business and trying to convert customers, I would say that first we had to have scalable testing platforms and customer interfaces, and we had to have that with all of our internal systems. Finding and hiring the right talent was a challenge at times. And we got to the point, and I'm kind of proud of this and of our HR leadership at the time. They actually developed a good pipeline of candidates for all the critical positions, which helped during all phases of growth. And I always said, if you find a real star out there, and if we don't have an open position, we'll figure out a way to hire them. So I'd say in that growth phase, and one challenge was staffing to the right level with the right type of people, and being adherent to a strict training program. But then in all of that, there's the challenge of maintaining that personal touch with the customer, which seemed easier in a smaller company. And in some of my previous experiences, I've seen where that kind of began to fray during periods of rapid growth. But knowing that from those experiences, I would say we did a pretty good job of getting in front of that. And then it was just transferring customers from our competitors at some point was the other challenge that we faced.
So it's interesting. So you went from, again, like scientist to CEO, but it's not just from the business acumen, obviously, is very important, and the technical acumen, but you mentioned a really important point, which is leadership and culture.
Right. Right. So I believed in a very transparent, quality, compliance driven, open culture, open communication with the employees, open door policy. I mean, employees are spending, say, 10 hours a day with work, including travel time. So it needs to be a place they want to be, and it needs to be a place where they're able to perform the job impeccably well because of the importance of the laboratory test results that they're producing. So that when the leadership cares and the mission is important and it's discussed regularly, I think the right people rise to the occasion and the company becomes part of who they are.
Yep. Yep. Cool. So that's great. So that's the growth story. That's really fantastic. Let's now kind of transition to the exit story. So how did you know that it was time?
Yeah, well, that's always a good question, right? Sometimes it's we're tired of it. Sometimes it's we made enough money. In this case, the healthcare reimbursements for the testing that we offered continued to decline. So there was a good bit of consolidation in the industry, as there were strategic buyers looking to acquire a book of business and to benefit from synergies. There were also financial buyers who were interested in acquiring good management teams and backing a roll-up of laboratories. So we were in our 8th year with the private equity firm, and the time seemed right for them to exit, as our revenue was almost 6 times the original purchase price, and it seemed that valuations would only decrease going forward.
Yeah.
So the holding was almost exactly 9 years. We sold to a strategic who's kept the lab strategic out of Rochester, New York, who's kept the lab open, and it's in business to this day.
Tell us about the process of preparing to take the company to market, and then the actual sort of, when you're in market and you're kind of going through the motions with the different prospective buyers? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of work in developing the materials uh, to communicate your company's value to potential buyers. So I'll say two things there. One is staying organized internally so that the appropriate documentation can be easily available and easily retrieved during a due diligence process. Having been through this before and knowing that this was our ultimate goal, we kind of had that type of organization. We had that type of organization in mind all the time. In order to help us with the formal book to kind of advertise our company, we hired an investment banker who did a great job documenting our history and value proposition and helping to identify potential acquirers.
Yeah. And what about just like the time commitment when you're going through that process? As a CEO, as other members of your leadership team, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's distracting, right? So it's distracting. We have interested parties who want to come and see the laboratory and spend a couple of days. And, myself and the senior leadership team not only had to prepare for that, but we would be involved maybe 2 full days with a potential buyer on site. And in all of that, we still had our day jobs, which we were all supported by a good team. But at that point, too, you kind of need to let the employees know what's the intent, and you need to have a strategy to keep the process stable and to maintain service levels, because when a company's getting sold, people get nervous. Now, this worked out well for everyone, but I thought first, if you're going into this, your employees need to trust the management. They need to trust the leadership, and the leadership needs to continue to engage, and if nothing else, to ensure retention of key employees and retention of customers. Because if the business starts to fall apart because leadership is taking its eye off the ball, or the employees are nervous, it's kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yep.
So it's being aware of all these moving pieces and staying in front of them, I think, was key to make for a successful landing for the company through a sales process.
What about you mentioned the employees. How do you do that? What were some of the things, Tony, that you did to maybe just help reassure your employees that things were going to be fine for them?
It was trust. It was developing that element of trust all along, and having transparent communication, and that open door and the open door policy for anyone that had a concern. So I would say it required paying more attention, more management by walking around and engagement.
But that's where, again, culturally, you had decided that this was going to be the way that you did things. So all of that really paid off for you in the long run, because you can't just build trust overnight, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's people are people, right? We all know how we want to be treated and how we should be treated, and that's always been part of the fabric. That's part of just who I am, how I was raised, and then I incorporated that into my leadership style, which made the job so much more enjoyable for me as well.
Yeah. Do you think the fact that you were a scientist helped, as opposed to maybe an accountant or an MBA or?
Well, it's different. I always had a passion for the life sciences. That's why I wanted to be a pharmacist, because I also like the the people action part of it. I would say as a scientist, it's not that much different in that than say maybe an accountant or someone else with a financial background, because it's the analytical mind.
Yeah.
Where do we want to go? How do we get there? What do we have to get there? What don't we have, and how do we get it? It's all those analytical thought processes. But believe me, I relied heavily on. I don't have a finance background. I relied heavily on my CFOs all along.
Right. So tell us just maybe a few of the lessons learned, Tony, that, again, maybe if you can contrast, this current exit maybe with the previous one. I mean, again, maybe were anything different? I mean, maybe some things that maybe are unanticipated or that have changed over time.
No, I think the lessons learned were the success of that was realized during this exit.
Yeah.
And that was what I said about the culture, the transparency, and not taking your eye off the ball with respect to the critical operating characteristics that could affect the company and the customer.
Yeah. Cool. Great story. So just kind of wrapping things up here. I mean, based on your experience, what advice would you have for a CEO in the life sciences sector that's maybe, currently trying to grow their company with an eye to exiting at some point?
Yeah. So kind of summarizing a few of the high points that I made here, I'd say be serious about the culture around employees, service quality and compliance. Remember, a financial buyer is interested in a cohesive management team that is leading a profitable company with a healthy culture. I would also say have good metrics around quality, customer service, finance, compliance, and all the other important segments of the business. You know and understand their meaningful thresholds and manage to them. Document and memorialize plans to improve or plans of correction as needed. All of that will be proof of a excellent management team. I'd say don't forget to have your data organized so they can be easily assembled for due diligence. It's going to be a distraction anyway, but it could be a much greater distraction if you're kind of caught unprepared. I'd say always know the value of your company. And finally, I'll just repeat what I said before: maintain the culture, and growth is never an excuse for the leadership or anyone to take the proverbial eye off the ball when it comes to employees, quality, compliance, or customers in a life science business.
Yep. Awesome. Well, those are some wonderful lessons learned, Tony. Thanks so much for sharing. And I really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome, Dario. Thank you for the opportunity.